Well, hey there, Instagram Live. It's Sunday morning where I am, but the person we're going to be talking with today, it's actually the afternoon, almost evening over there. But nonetheless, real quick, just want to say, hey, look, got my lemur shirt on from the Woodland Park Zoo. Shout out to Woodland Park Zoo. Not that they sent this to me, I bought it, but I thought it would be appropriate because Woodland Park Zoo was where I did my very first internship. Gosh, right out of high school, a long, long time ago. And so I wanted to wear the shirt today because the discussion today is going to be about wildlife education and environmental education. And I got my start there at the Woodland Park Zoo as an internship before going to college. And it was college then where I figured out not just animal care and conservation, but wildlife education is where my heart was. So today's guest is Jack Baker, and I think he's going to be joining us soon. And he's doing some great work, and I came across his stuff here on Instagram a while back, and I've really enjoyed it. He's got a podcast going as well, and so we're going to bring him on here in a little bit to have a discussion about exactly why wildlife education and environmental education is important. The work that he does too, because he's traveling all over. He's getting all sorts of cool accolades and things like that. Here he is. Glitch thing, and then you'll be right on board. Hopefully, I can hear him. Let's see, come through. Jack, are you there? Maybe Instagram. Come on, you can do it. All right. Well, we'll wait a little bit longer. Oh, here it comes. There he is.
Hello.
Ah, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I know it's like what 5 o'clock in the evening in your neck of the woods, right?
Yes, I've had to you can't see, but there are lamps all around me because we've hit the point of the day where in midsummer at this time I'm looking out at a beautiful sunset or like a nice clear sunny day, and now I'm just looking out a pitch black window and freezing cold weather. So we're
Well,
surrounded by lamps. Hopefully, it's creating a nice lighting scenario
it
rather
is.
than just pitch black.
It's an incredible aesthetic. I absolutely love it. I love it. Love it. Hey, so real quick, so I know a lot of my audience who hangs out with me here on Instagram probably has not seen or may or may not know who you are. So real quick, Jack, I know personally just from connecting with you here on Instagram, you are
Mhm.
based in Scotland. You do a
Yeah.
lot of work in the world of environmental education and wildlife education, but break it down real quick for everybody. Who are you and what do you do?
So, yes, so my name is Jack Baker. I am a conservationist, environmental educator, and host of Pangolin, the conservation podcast. So, I am one of those, and I feel like it's maybe a common thing that you can relate to in the world of nature related careers, is I am a person who wears many hats all of the time. So I work part time on a PhD that's all about us understanding the impact of conservation work. I do environmental education stuff with the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, both kind of teaching kids in a wildlife garden and also kind of doing some kind of stuff there, trying to understand the impact of that and kind of those things. And then on the side, my other thing that I do is Pangolin, the conservation podcast, which is a show that is a celebration of all of the weird and wonderful animals of the one of the weird and wonderful animals of the world. They are, yes. So I have guests on that who work with bizarre creatures, do interesting ways of doing kind of conservation work. Yeah, all kinds of different stuff. So that's kind of the many different aspects of the work, and I'm sure we'll get into each of them. But that's kind of an overview of everything I do, I suppose.
And it's incredible. I love catching up with you on Instagram, and then I've followed some of the other videos you posted. I know it was about what's it, a month ago for the, is it, I'm probably gonna butcher it. It's the NAAEE. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes,
Yeah. So
NAAE.
yeah,
Mhm.
NAAE. So and you were doing it was all remote, but you were doing still like podcasts by people coming in together, and it
Mhm.
was on YouTube and everything, and just fascinating as far as the sort of becoming a hub of bringing everybody together that does this work. I was
Yeah,
mentioning before you popped on that I'm wearing a lemur shirt from Woodland Park Zoo, which is in
lovely.
Seattle, Washington, where
Mhm.
I did my very first internship, and that was for me. I've always, even as a kid, loved animals. Was always curious about them.
Mhm.
Getting to work hands on with them. Lemurs was one of the first species I was hands on with, even
Mhm.
in that internship there for that summer, sparked that was like the starting point really where it confirmed for me this is what I want to do with my life. It was in
Mhm.
college then that I learned it was the wildlife education side of it that I really enjoyed connecting people with wildlife. So I want to ask you for you, I mean, you're doing so much in the PhD, basically like measuring, is this impactful?
Mhm.
How's it going? But then all the work you're doing with NAAE and your own podcast and everything, what was your spark? What was your starting point for taking this path as like, this is what I want to do, unconventional or not, this is where I belong?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. And I think the reason I think about it, right, is like through the podcast and all of these other things, I quite often am like a facilitator of conversations, right? Like so often I am not like I always say like I'm not that interesting. Don't tell anyone that, but I'm not that interesting. Yeah, I like to facilitate these conversations, and with the NAAWE work, so they had an online conference, and so I was helping coordinate and produce like a podcast stage for them, and bringing all of these people together. And then through my podcast, I sit down and I learn and I listen to people's stories from all around the world, and like through my education work, a lot of that is me kind of telling kids or whoever the audience is about stuff, but it's also me learning from them and learning what they're passionate about. And like, and I think like, I guess when I've been tracking all of that back to why do I care about nature and why what got me onto this path is that I've always had this natural curiosity, right? And I've always cared about the story of the underdog or the person who couldn't be involved or the person who felt like they didn't belong or the
Mm.
person who, whose work quote unquote didn't matter or wasn't going to happen or all these things. That's always been something I've cared about. And I think through my whole life, I've gone through phases where I kind of detached from wildlife conservation set aside, but I was always fascinated in people's stories, right? And then when I
Hmm.
came back into this world, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, I'm not sure what it was. And that kind of passion was always there. The one moment I can always pinpoint is the changer though, for me in my own story of like, okay, where did this fascination and learning more about wildlife become my path is, um, I remember going to the Highland Wildlife Park, which is a zoo run by the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland here in Scotland, funnily enough. And I remember it was the year I was about to graduate from my undergrad degree, and I'd gone away to uni and done politics and international relations.
Hmm.
And I was about to graduate and I was about to make this choice of like, well, do I go and do like a classic office job? Do I go and kind of pursue a civil service job maybe or something like that using this degree? What do I do? And my whole life, this love of like telling nature stories and being happiest in nature kind of, had been pushed down and it was not something I'd focused on. And then I went to this zoo the winter I was about to graduate from this degree, and I saw up there they had a baby polar bear called Hamish, wee Hamish, and his mum Victoria, who was just the most beautiful, incredible bear. Just the best, and the two of them playing around in this like in the icy kind of weather, running around in the beautiful Scottish Highlands. It was that moment I was like, okay, these are stories that empower me. These are stories that matter to me. These are things that I love. And I want to spend my life doing something with them and protecting them and working with them rather than sat in an office and doing something else. So that point, I went and did a master's in conservation, and that's when the kind of career shift happened. But
Hmm.
yeah, I still haven't distilled it down to a good answer, but that's the
Well,
rough kind of thread and turning point, I think. I
well,
think.
I could say in my many years of doing work
Mhm.
with wildlife and humans and coming across people with our
Mhm.
similar passion, sometimes it doesn't distill down to a simple
Mhm.
answer, right? And
Yeah.
I think for your story, from my perspective, listening to you, it's a thread that many of us have. I mean, I was very fortunate that I had a family that saw what I was passionate about and helped me, stumble down that path.
Yeah.
And I've always done it from a young age. But there are so many people in this realm of conservation, wildlife care, naturalism, any of this that you want to talk about, that it was like, oh, I was doing this first, but then I got curious about that. Or in your story, it was just seeing those polar bears. In that moment, there
Mhm.
was sort of that switch that happened. It was like, I need to be a part of this somehow,
Mhm.
and I think that's one thing you also brought up too is that connection to nature, that connection we feel to wildlife or
Mhm.
animals, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
That's something I've always been passionate about because I've always seen that as a
Mhm.
presenter to others. I see the audience's reaction
Mhm.
to an animal or to the discussion around wildlife or nature and that lean in that curiosity that oh I didn't know and they want to learn more. There's this innate
Mhm.
desire for us to have that connection.
Mhm.
So I appreciate your story and can absolutely understand that it's like yeah it's
Mhm.
not necessarily a simple well this is how it happened.
Mhm.
It's sort of a complex experience because there is sort of that discovery and that
Mhm.
aha and then we go well how do I chase this down, like what does that look like? So yeah, I think it's a
Mhm.
great story. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I always think that's the thing, right? Of like with my PhD and the work that I'm doing now with the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland about impact, right? We wish we could like understand the impact we had on the people who visit us at the zoo, or we wish we could
Right.
understand who visit the people who visit the botanic garden, or we wish we could understand the people who work with us, or like work like what we wish we could understand all that. And then I think if, but then when I think myself, I'm like, well, I don't really even understand the impact that all of those things have had on me growing up. So
That's
this
true,
question
right?
becomes so challenging, and like, I don't know, I really one day want to sit down and track this pathway out because it's that your parents maybe or grandparents or carers or teachers whoever shape you when you're younger, and then your friends, and then maybe you have to find it on your own, or maybe you discover it by mistake because
Yeah.
your happy place is going for a hike in a forest or going for a hike up a mountain. There's all these different elements that factor in for my love of nature and wildlife, and I just yeah, it's a big messy thing that can sometimes be lemurs, can sometimes be bears, can sometimes be all sorts of things. But yeah, it's a nice problem to have, I suppose. Being like, what? Why do I love this so much? It's
Yeah.
not like like it's a good problem to have.
Well, I agree. There are a lot of people that are out there like, well, I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what excites me, you know. So yes, it is a good problem to have. But I want to go back to what you mentioned about your PhD studies, and
Mhm.
I've always, I didn't go through a lot of college. You know, I was able to graduate and have a job waiting for me, and so I never went back for a master's or anything more than that, or any higher degree. But in my experience of doing all this, I have been able to go back and teach at a college here in California, and the discussions, it's lecture and lab around wildlife education, teaching people how to teach about wildlife education. And I always refer to what you're talking about, and I would love to pick your brain more. We'll have to have another conversation. I'm sure it'll go much longer than what we have here today. But the I always refer to it as the invisible ripple. Is you never know when you toss that rock of education and excitement and your passion out into that audience. There's an invisible ripple that happens. You never get to see. I shouldn't say never. You rarely get to see or get feedback from how that impacts what impact do I have on that audience, whether it inspires them to be a little more thoughtful in the way they live their life to be ecologically friendly. Does it inspire them to take action and do something to become an activist or someone who's doing something for conservation change in their career, whatever it might be? And every now and then I've been very fortunate. It's very few and far between, but every now and then I get an email or a text saying, hey, I just want to let you know when I was 5 years old, you took the time to talk to me and my family about, armadillos, and I just graduated and got a job at the zoo, because and you inspired me or whatever. Very rarely, but it does happen. I just got one about a month ago where it was a full circle. A guy I knew when he was a kid as a keeper at a zoo here in California, and he mentioned one of my former students is now he's mentoring him at that zoo. So it was like this weird full circle situation. But yeah, I've always referred to that as boy, easy for me to say, invisible ripple. And I would love to know more about your PhD studies. Are you able to find any way to measure some of this stuff, or is that sort of the big hill to climb right now for you?
So this is the thing, right? I think so. The way that I approach this question, and I think what's really exciting for me is I now get to look at it from both sides. So for me, that is that point of like impact, right? It's a very powerful metaphor we use, right? Of like we are doing something that's going to make a difference. It's going to change something, like, and yeah. So there's two ways I always think you can look at the point of impact, right? That you can look back and learn from what happened before then
Mm.
and how you got to that point of impact. Or you can look forward and see what happens next, right? And kind of understand it that way. And what's really exciting for me is I'm at this point now where my PhD studies look backwards. So with my PhD, I'm actually working with the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh to understand the processes that their staff members, whether they be scientists, educators, whoever they are that work for that organisation, what processes do they go to create change, right? And what processes do they go through to get, and the challenges do they go through? What enables their success? What limits their success? What can we learn from all of that? And then going forward, my work, what's quite exciting now is working with the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland a couple of days a week. That's where I'm trying to understand this ongoing kind of what happens once that moment of impact happens, right? What happens to everybody else that has come into the classroom, has come into the garden, has come into the zoo, has come in and learned. And I think that is it's still all coming together, and I think it's something that we are that there are no one in conservation has a good answer to that question
Right.
yet. I
Yeah. It's
don't
so
think.
hard to measure it.
Yes. And I think for me, like, what I'm trying to do is build in, and I think the way that I'm trying to do it now is build in more qualitative data. So stories and journaling or using arts-based methods or something like that to try and understand that better. Because up to this point, and I think where we've gone wrong in understanding impact in a lot of ways in the past, is we've relied on numbers because
Hmm.
conservationists love numbers. We
Well,
love
yeah,
a number, and it's
right. Science
brilliant.
in general. Yeah. They need
Yeah.
that evidence, right?
And they're brilliant and they're important. But I think there needs to be now moving forward this pairing of the numbers of who are we seeing, what are we doing, how many species are we saving, all this sort of stuff in numbers. But that has to be backed up with the qualitative stories that we can learn from as well. And so
Mhm.
what I'm trying to do now is combine all of that stuff and bring it together. And I think hopefully, if it's all being written up now and all the methodology and stuff has been written up now, and it's all coming together quite nicely for my PhD side of like, I just did all these creative workshops to try and understand that kind of pre-impact moment. And I hope I can kind of adapt those into something that measures after the change as well.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, there's something about just getting people in a room talking about things, drawing maps and drawing their emotions or drawing their feelings. Or we recently actually at Edinburgh Zoo, I was really excited. We did a kind of participatory mapping exercise. So
Okay.
we got some high schoolers who've been coming to the zoo for years and years and years and working in this wildlife garden space that we have to draw maps of the space, right? And I was like, draw the map to start with, right? Draw whatever you want to do. There's a pond, there's a little yurt that they work in, there's a fire pit, there's these things. Draw those things in, but then fill it in with your memories, your stories, your ideas, and seeing the depth
Oh.
of stuff that came out to that, you're like, there is the impact, right? There is the things that change. There is the well-being. There's the story. There's the thing. So like trying to bring those elements in is what I'm kind of obsessed with and focused on now and seeing how we can do it in the best way possible because it's really yeah, it's really fun, and I think as conservationists, it also is nice and it's reassuring, and it gives us the boost we need. Because
Mm.
as much as it's nice for somebody to go, you saw 100 students this month, it's more powerful if you can go, remember that lesson you taught 6 months ago that even you don't remember? This kid has just drawn how important it was for them
Right.
on a map. Right, and that has changed them, and yeah, I'm still working through exactly the best ways to do that, but that's kind of where I'm at, and I don't know if that answered your question, but that's where my brain is in all of these questions right now.
Well, and again, I go back to the fact that I think, at least in my education time, and I still have come across it in my career, science requires that evidence that is solid, and we need the numbers. We
Mhm.
can't just rely on anecdotal. We can't just
Yeah.
rely on, vague this. We can assume things, but we can't apply that to our final outcome or
Hmm.
whatever. And I agree with you, and I think that's awesome that you're taking that angle where we need to start looking at other avenues for how we're going to measure stuff,
Hmm.
bringing in other tools to look at that. And I like that mapping idea is brilliant because especially when you're like, hey, look, 6 months later, someone put this on their little map that they made for
Hmm.
what's been impactful in their life, and you were on it, or your talk was on it, or your program, or whatever.
Hmm.
And I agree. I think sometimes I look at how, I mean, it might sound like a big leap, but Jane Goodall went into her studies and the whole thing about naming animals versus not naming animals. And they're like, oh, it's science. They've got to be numbered. You can't get involved with them. You can't, there's no personalities. It's just action only. And she's like,
Hmm.
okay, yeah, but. And she really turned the whole animal behavior study world on its head because of her honest approach of like, look, this needs to be done better and more appropriately. And it really opened the door, I think, for us, the next generation coming in and your generation coming in to start going, wait, okay, science does have its absolutes, perhaps, and it does need those exact numbers or measurings, but also living creatures, and living world, living elements, habitats, ecology, it's changing and evolving. And sometimes it's not just that single measuring stick for everything. So that's a cool approach that you're taking to that. I think that's pretty awesome.
Hmm.
Uh,
It's good fun. Sorry. What were you going to say?
no, no, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say it is, and it's challenging sometimes, and it's rewarding in other times, and it's I don't know, it's complicated and it's mushy in my brain, and it's all these things that you have to kind of pull out. But it's something that I love, and I just want to, in case we're about to move on, I don't know what the next question is going to be, but I do want to say that
No,
like
go ahead.
none of this is done in singularity. Like that's how I
Right.
think about these things. But the important work that we're doing at RZSS is part of an amazing team working within the Discovery and Learning department there, and I, with the PhD, would be absolutely nowhere without my supervisors nudging and pushing and going. That's and this is where what you were kind of getting at, the anecdote, right? That's wonderful, but that sounds like an opinion or an anecdote rather than something sciencey and like that's
Right.
based in actually the scientific method, right? And those kind of people pushing on both and trying to, yeah. So like just to highlight on either of those elements, I'm the one here talking today, but those all of those worlds are nothing. And I think to solve our biggest challenges and all of these questions, that's the best way of working is bringing all of those voices and thoughts together.
And I appreciate you so much for bringing that up because that is exactly true. None of this happens in a silo. None of this happens with one person only doing the work on that. So yes, absolutely. Big thanks and gratitude to everybody that your PhD and your work is involving and what they're
Mm-hmm.
adding to it as well. Absolutely. And that's conversations I've had over the years and the things I've observed and experienced as well when I've traveled to conservation sites. It does not happen just with one organization or one person or
Mm-hmm.
even just a handful. It's a collective that happens. It is, just like with wildlife or environmental education, you can be the person talking and presenting, but you're standing on shoulders of people who've done a lot more research, to give you that information to
Yeah.
present in a way that's digestible to your audience or to your students.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us to where I wanted to go next, if you don't mind, is that for you in the work you have done thus far, and what you have experienced, why is environmental education important? Why is this type of conservation work important?
Hmm. Okay, that is a very good question, and I think it's a question that I think about a lot, right? Because I think sometimes I don't know, I think sometimes we can become when we're talking to people over and over and over again, or online or whatever it is, you sometimes feel like you're talking into the void a little bit
Hmm.
of like who's out there listening, right? And who's out there caring and who's out there doing these things. But then I think it's something, and especially as we move more online, that becomes, especially with a podcast, actually, that sometimes feels like who's out there listening to this, like
Right?
what's going on.
Talk about the
Um,
invisible ripple.
yes, of like anywhere in the world could have streamed this, and in countries I'll never go to because I just won't have the opportunity to, and have never been to in the past. Like it's crazy to think about. Um, but for me, the reason that environmental education matters is conservation is for everybody. Conservation is needed. Like the nature space and nature and wildlife is includes us all. Like I'd say that like the first time I said it, it sounds like we're separate. No, nature includes us all, right? We all
Right.
need to have an awareness of it. We all need to think about it. We all should be caring about it, and we all have a right to care about it because we're a part of it, right? We are there, and it's our story, and so environmental education matters to me because for so long, conservation and nature spaces have been dominated by a very certain type of voice, right? And a
Hmm.
very specific type of voice. And that voice has done a good job in a lot of ways, and they have done amazing things in a lot of realms. And that's not me saying everyone who's come before me is bad and evil and all that. That's
Right,
not
right.
what I'm saying. But what I'm saying now is education matters because everybody deserves to have the opportunity to be in that space. And if through education we can reach as many people as possible, we might reach people who didn't even think about nature as their storyline, right? They didn't think about it. They didn't care about a cassowary or a pangolin or a tapir or a sea slug or a starfish or a whale or whatever it is. They might not have cared. And then we go and we teach them and we show them something, right? And we share a fact or we share a story with them that they care about, and it changes their pathway and it changes their life and it makes them love something that they didn't before. And then
Right.
they go on and tell somebody something. It allows us to just, I don't know, and then using that as a jumping board, there's so many ways that it can go for mattering, right? People might spend more time in nature, which then, or like we can encourage them to go into nature for their own personal well-being, whether that be mental or physical health. We can encourage them to, I don't know, live more sustainably. We can encourage that all these different things open up through the world of education. And that's why it kind of matters to me, is that we can reach people who, yeah, previously didn't see themselves as part of this space. And yeah, and also it matters because I think what it does in a return way, I never like to think of myself as somebody who stands kind of on a pedestal and tells people things. Like, I don't like that. I
Mm.
want to be somebody who stands and learns as much from the people who are in the room as I tell them. And I think as conservationists, environmental education is important because it holds us to account and it makes us think about what people care about, right? It makes us
Yeah.
think about what matters to people. And it makes us realize, like, oh, this way we've been doing things is not working on people, and people don't care about this story, or why don't they care? And it makes us think, and they ask questions that challenge us. Like, I remember before, I've been teaching a class and a child, and I missed, so it was a class that I have every month. They come back every month, and I'd missed the previous session because I'd been at a conference in the US, and they stood up. Then I was like, "So did anyone?" And I told them about what I was doing, and and one of the kids in the front row put their hand up and was like, "Why did you travel to the US? Because you're teaching us about environmental education. Why did you fly there?" Right? And having that space and that environmental education space where people can feel comfortable to challenge and make
Yeah.
us think about our things, and I can go back and kind of go, okay, that's a very good question, and we can go backwards and forwards on these kind of thoughts, and we can kind of discuss it and answer that question, and sit with that uncomfortability sometimes is
Hmm.
also really important. So yeah, I think that's the value of environmental education to me. It's this kind of learning both ways. It's opening doors for people. It's, yeah, building communities. It's all of these amazing things. So that's the importance to me.
Nice, nice. I love that. I love that. And yeah, absolutely. When we get questioned by those that we're hoping to
Mhm,
facilitate some education to, that put us on the spot, where it's like
mhm,
they have clearly thought about this and they understand the concept, so they're like, hey, wait a minute, why is that, and that's
mhm,
so great. I love that. And I also want to go back to what you said early on in the answer to that question, is that natural spaces are for everyone, and environmental education, yes, there's been certain specific voices for a long time that have been the only voice, and to diversify it is important, to reach out to others to make them realize it's inclusive. This is a part of the human experience, not just one group or one section, and
mhm,
yes, absolutely, yes, I love what you said, that when I talk about nature, it includes humans too. That's brilliant.
mhm,
I mean, it's because it's
mhm,
true. We are not separate, although our modern world seems to
mhm,
want, or just by accidental design, it has created space where we do feel removed, and
mhm,
you have to make an effort sometimes to get back in nature. I do appreciate your perspective on the fact that when we talk about nature, that means humans too, because we're absolutely tied to it, even in our crazy modern world. So yeah, excellent stuff. Well, I don't want to keep you much past the 30 minutes I promised I would take of your time, but I think we could probably talk for another 2 or 3 hours because I want to pick your
mhm.
brain more. I do have one last question I want to end on, but
Okay.
before I do, I want to ask you this: is there anything that we haven't touched on yet you think would be important for those that are going to be watching this now, or those watching later, that you would definitely want to make sure people take away from this?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I guess for people who are listening, that I suppose, and please don't feel free to keep me for as long as we need, because I know I'm a talker. You might need to cut me off at a certain point. Is actually the
Fair
problem.
enough.
But the takeaway that I always like to end a lot of my talks and stuff when I go and deliver things with, and I think it's something that I say to every single person, is protect the joy and the childishness and the spark that
Mm,
inspired you in the first place, right? And for me, I always think about that little boy who loved being in nature. I think about the little boy who went to the zoo and had like a snake wrapped around him and loved it. I think about the boy who looked at that bear and changed his whole pathway. And the reason I encourage everyone to hold on to that joy and those moments of like childish silliness is because we exist in a world which tries to push your joy down. And especially in spaces like conservation and nature, so often the headlines are bad, 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 terrible,
mm,
terrible, bad, bad. And it doesn't need to be that way. Conservationists, environmentalists, whether you label yourself that or not, actually, if you care about nature, whatever way you care about it, there are people all around the world making a difference. And if you can hold on to that little joy, that little memory of what got you inspired in the first place, and hold that tight and inside you and protect it from the rain and the storm of bad news and this and that and the next thing, that is what will keep you going. And that was what will empower you to go on forever and ever and ever. And I think that's the thing that I always like to tell people. Um, if that was an opportunity you wanted me to self promote, I could also do that. But that's the more important message that I think people should I should take away.
Well,
I can
we can
plug
do the
myself.
self promote at the very end. We'll save that for the very end. But
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what is it that we should protect that spark from? But you answered that.
Hmm.
So and I appreciate that tremendously. What would be, in your experience? I know you stepped away for a little bit from
Hmm.
things and kind of recalibrated. What would you offer up to someone who might be like, okay, how do I protect that, or how do I get that back? Because I know it's there, but I feel like I've strayed because the news has been so dark, or the reality of conservation can be harsh sometimes because it doesn't always go the right direction. Do you have any recommendations on how someone could protect that?
Hmm. And yeah, and I think that's a good question because it's something that I like earlier this year. I was delivering a talk actually not far from my hometown, which was really sweet and special for me. And afterwards, someone came up and asked a very similar question. Like a high schooler was like, "I really care about everything you said, but already like I look and people in positions of power all
Mm,
around the world don't seem to care about this or don't seem to do this or don't seem to." And I think the thing that I don't know. I think for me, there's a couple ways to protect it. The first thing is remembering that there have been, and I'll stay as non-political entirely. There have been people who are ignorant and push back on environmentalism and push back on nature and take it for granted and destroy things for profit and do it forever.
hmm.
And still, we have persevered, and still we care, and still we are turning the tide on a number of these issues. Because if you keep working and you care about it, and you push and you push and you push, things will change, and things have changed over time, and things are getting better in a lot of ways. And so, if you remember the fact that like there are people who've come before you who have faced up to the Goliaths and won, that's so important. And I think it's
Yeah.
something to remember that there is people who've been doing this before you. And I think the other thing that I always like to say to protect yourself is there are other people around you now as well. There are friends, there are colleagues, there are projects all around the world, there are students, there are podcast guests, there are friends on Instagram or places you never thought there would be, all around the world, doing incredible things you can't even imagine. So if you need to tap out for a month, for 2 months, for a year to look after yourself and recharge your battery,
Yeah.
do it and look after yourself, because if you go and you do that and you refresh and then you come back in, you will be even more powerful, and you maybe will have new ideas and you'll maybe bring a new perspective again or have something different. So look after yourself, right? Don't feel like
Hmm.
you need to be working all the time. You can, and if it's your passion, do it. I am not a model of perfect balance in my own life. I do too much, and I know I do, and that's why I burn out. And I wish I could do what I preach to others, but holding on to that idea of like, okay, like I'm not alone here is so important.
Yeah.
And I think taking time to reflect and space to reflect on that, whether it's a long break, a short break, whether it's just doing something you love, carving out time to paint or to write or to go out for a hike in nature or whatever it is, like today, like I have stuff I need to be doing today. This is the one piece of work I'm doing today, one conversation I'm having today, because I know in the run up to Christmas, in the last kind of weeks before that holiday, I'm going to be stressed of trying to finish stuff up. And I was like, this Sunday, I'm gatekeeping as a time for me to sit in bed and then watch terrible TV, and then I'll come and do this, and I'll go for a run, and like I'll gatekeep this for myself. So
Nice.
yeah, just that would be my advice, I think.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. Okay, so here's the question I was going to ask originally.
Okay.
Why pangolins?
Have you got another 45 minutes to go through everything?
I don't actually. I've got, but I want
No.
to. Can you distill it down to a few minutes? Because
Yes. Yes.
in full disclosure, I went to college in a time we did not have internet.
Hmm.
I had this giant 2 volume encyclopedia about mammals. There was one, I mean, we're talking like
Hmm.
a couple pages per species. Then for the pangolins, because this was the 90s, there was like one little paragraph and one little pencil drawing. And I was like, that is the most fascinating thing that I will probably never ever see in my life. Fast forward into my career, I'm working at a zoo and taking care of two white-bellied tree pangolins, and they were hands-on. They were illegally taken from the wild, but had gotten very used to human care because they were medically really poor space when they arrived. And so I mean, never before and never since have I ever worked with them.
Hmm.
Truly just a mind-boggling
Hmm.
species. So I know why I'm fascinated by them. Clearly, you
Yeah.
have a very deep love of them. So I just wanted to hear
Yes.
why, for you, why pangolins?
Yes. So for me, so it all started, and my whole kind of conservation journey of podcasting actually started because of these animals. Where in university, when I'd gone back, I'd seen the bear, changed my mind, yay, wonderful. We've gone back, we've done this master's, and it got to the point where I needed to do something for my dissertation, right? And um, the good thing about the course that I was doing was it was an interdisciplinary course. So it studied elements of zoology and geography and politics and all sorts of different schools of thought were part of this degree. And because of that, the final kind of project that you could do was either a um, a classic dissertation of however many thousands and thousands of words, or a creative portfolio. And
Mm.
the way that my mind works, I am far more inclined to do the creative portfolio. I am dyslexic, I'm dyspraxic, I talk too much, as you have learned. I just that's who I am. And I was like, let's do the creative portfolio. But I was like, okay, that's all well and good, right? But like to do something creative, I was like, okay, you have to have a story, right? You can't just set out with nothing. You have to have this story, and you need to do something. And my supervisor there was like, well, I'm working with these people in Namibia who are working on this little creature that it's a pangolin. Like you might not have heard of them, but whatever. And I was like, actually, no, I have no idea what this is. And I
Yeah.
looked and I learned and I learned and I learned, and the more you learn about them, and the more that you engage with them, right? They are the reason their story captivated me was twofold. One, they are so unique and so special in that
Mm.
they are the world's only scaly mammal. They are like some of them climb trees, some of them live in burrows, some of them yeah, some of them like their noses close when they're eating termites. They have like little muscles. That's just so
Yeah.
charming to me. They're wonderful. The fact that one of my interviewees for the podcast originally classifies them as ecosystem engineers because of the fact that like they have such a big impact for even though they're so small. Like
Mhm.
all of that fascinated me. And then the second part of the reason that their story fascinated me was like no one knows it, right? They are the most trafficked mammal in
Yeah.
the world, and nobody knows what they are. Why, right? And when they do know, or when they do hear about conservation threats that happen to pangolins, whether that be the illegal trade, or habitat fragmentation, or habitat loss, or whatever it is, that story then is so complicated and so nuanced and so interesting, but gets so flattened into this like often very racially charged, often very kind of problematic, nasty, targeted story that villainize groups of people really unfairly, actually, and in a lot of ways. Not all of them. There are bad people in the world of pangolins
Sure.
and this thing. But
Sure.
it's a more nuanced story than that. And
Yeah.
the way that their story has been told or not been told has allowed for these or had allowed for these kind of misconceptions to become the narrative. So this incredibly charismatic species teamed up with this incredibly important story. I was like, I love you, and I can't tell you how much. And there's whole other depth about how could like the person. It was all happening during the pandemic as well, so that was adding another depth to this that we can get into at another time, perhaps, like because it's
Sure.
a long, long story. But like that's what kind of turned me on to them, and I was like. This is the animal for me. And then the podcast, when I put it online and saw the response to it, I was so heartened. And that's how we kind of Pangolin kind of started as this celebration of this one species and telling the story of this one thing, but has now grown into a celebration of all of these underappreciated, misunderstood, nuanced stories Still under the banner of the pangolin though, because it
Of
does have a
course.
special place in my heart because of just how wonderful that was. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's awesome. I love it. I always love hearing because everyone, many people, like, oh, I have so many favorites, I couldn't pick one. But there's always one. There's always one that just somehow grabbed us a certain way that no other species has,
yeah.
and every story is always unique. And I also love the fact that although your podcast started with the pangolin love and passion and wanting to learn more and share more, you're still going to keep that as the banner to introducing people to other less known but no less important species. That's great. So this is
Mhm.
the part then where I will ask you to self promote. Where can anybody watching this, like,
Yeah.
what's the podcast name exactly? Where else can they find your work?
Mhm.
Where else can they find you and stuff you're putting out there other than on Instagram as well? Everywhere. Just dump it all right here.
Perfect. I also wanted to say, I was like, I also sometimes feel like a bit of a fraud because people say, like, oh, the pangolin must be your favorite animal. And it is, but it's tied with something else. And
Oh, okay.
the tapir gets in a strong, like,
Nice.
and the more that I've looked at it, my other favorites are like armadillos. I love like, um, it's basically anything with a big nose. I think I've determined is my animals of choice. So I love them. But
Fair
that
enough.
aside, aside from promoting tapirs, what I would like to say is, I guess like, yes, you can find me on here. So I'm at the Only Jack Baker on Instagram, and also at Pangolin Podcast on here if you want to find the podcast. Um, and then, yeah, across other social medias, I'm on LinkedIn. Just search my name if you want to find me there. I am on at Pangolin Podcast is on TikTok. I very rarely use it, but I'm there, so I've been posting more. So do go. There are clips from the podcast there. And then for the podcast itself, you just search for Pangolin, the conservation podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts. It's now on YouTube as well. Anywhere
Nice.
you get your podcasts from, there's 100 and something episodes there covering everything from pangolins to armadillos to tapirs to hornbills. Also a big nose. I'm now realizing how many of these things.
There's a definite
To
theme here.
yeah. Um, to what else have we got? We've got interesting ways of doing conservation. So people use music for conservation education. We've got people who use storytelling and artivism and all sorts of different ways. And I sit down every week and talk to them. And I've yeah, and if you for some reason you've thought I'm interesting, they are way more interesting. So go and listen to them speak because they are listen to the podcast where I ask them questions because they are the people I speak to there are fascinating, amazing, wonderful, beautiful souls, and I love it. And I'm all over the place with it. So go and have a look. And if anyone has any questions, I'm always happy to on Instagram or wherever shoot me a message, and I'm more than happy to answer because yeah, and it's part of that community building thing that I like to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, just reach out.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate you for one. I don't remember exactly how I came across your Instagram initially, but then the more I started like, oh, looking at the podcast, and it's like you just, it's fun when you find somebody as passionate and pardon the term, crazy as you are when it comes to conservation and wildlife. Because like you said, it's this community, and we all hit that point sometimes of burnout, but we can support each
Mhm,
other, and it's fun sometimes to just watch what someone else is doing and go, God, that's so cool. And then
mhm.
just what you're doing with the podcast is, highlighting other people doing this work, and yeah, I mean the passion shines through talking to you. So I appreciate you tremendously. And thank you so much for taking time today to have this conversation. I think we're probably going to have another one because there's clearly a lot more to cover, but I'm running out of time. So, and I'll let you go back and enjoy what's left of your Sunday of doing nothing before the craziness of the pre-holiday stuff happens.
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who's listened to this live or afterwards. Like, thank you so much to everyone for tuning in, and yeah, it's a pleasure, and it's the same feeling back the way of like we are a bigger community than I think we realize. And find when you find new aspects of that community and all of those amazing people on Instagram and through social media and those things, it's always so wonderful. It's always
Yeah.
nice to have, I don't know, it's always nice when people have the confidence to connect in that way and go, oh, I like what you do. So, and do you want to come and chat about it? So thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me. Like, yeah, it's been fabulous. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, we'll be in touch. Take care.
Perfect. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Have a good one,
Bye.
everybody.